The grand concert hall buzzed with excitement as people filed in, finding their seats among the plush red velvet chairs. Soft lights bathed the wooden stage in a warm glow, highlighting the magnificent black grand piano that waited silently for its master. The audience members spoke in hushed tones, their voices a gentle hum of anticipation. Among them sat Mei Lin, a small woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a modest blue dress she had carefully ironed that morning, and clutched her program with slightly trembling hands. This was the 5th classical piano recital she had attended this month. She had saved up for months to afford these tickets, working extra shifts at the hotel where she cleaned rooms. Mei Lin slipped into her seat in the 3rd row, close enough to see the pianist's hands, but not so close that she would have to strain her neck looking up at the stage. She liked this spot because she could watch the fingers dance across the keys, memorizing their patterns and movements. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" A gray-haired woman gestured to the empty chair beside Mei Lin. "No, please," Mei Lin replied with a smile, tucking her small purse closer to make room. She noticed the woman's elegant clothes and pearl earrings and felt suddenly self-conscious of her own simple outfit. "First time at the symphony?" the woman asked kindly. Mei Lin shook her head. "No, I come whenever I can. I love piano music. Do you play?" The question made Mei Lin's cheeks warm. "A little," she said softly, though this was both true and not true. She had never taken a formal lesson in her life, but for the past 4 years, she had been teaching herself to play, watching countless online videos and practicing on a small keyboard she had found at a second-hand shop. Every day she woke up at 5 in the morning just to practice for an hour before heading to work. The woman nodded and turned her attention to her program. Mei Lin did the same, her eyes drinking in the details about tonight's performer, the world-famous pianist Ivan Petrov, known not just for his brilliant technique, but also for his theatrical performances and occasional audience interaction. He was famous for his interpretations of Chopin and Liszt, 2 composers whose music Mei Lin had practically memorized by ear. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. A spotlight appeared on the side of the stage, and the announcer's voice filled the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the internationally acclaimed virtuoso, Ivan Petrov." The audience burst into applause as a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair strode confidently onto the stage. He wore a tailored black suit that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Ivan Petrov bowed deeply, his movements graceful and practiced. When he straightened, his piercing blue eyes surveyed the audience with a mixture of pride and appreciation. He sat at the piano bench, adjusting it slightly before placing his hands just above the keys. He paused for a moment of perfect silence and then began to play. The first notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the hall, and Mei Lin found herself holding her breath. His fingers moved with such precision and control, coaxing sounds from the instrument that seemed almost impossible. The familiar melody washed over her, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting it carry her away. She had listened to this piece hundreds of times on her small phone with cheap earbuds, but hearing it live performed by a master was entirely different. She could feel the vibrations of the lower notes in her chest, could sense the tension in the room as everyone was transported by the music. When he finished the first piece, the audience erupted in applause. Ivan smiled, bowing his head slightly in acknowledgement. He moved through his program with flawless precision. Bach, more Beethoven. Then Chopin's complex ballads that made Mei Lin's heart race with their difficulty and beauty. During the intermission, Mei Lin stayed in her seat while others filed out to the lobby for drinks and conversation. She replayed the music in her mind, her fingers moving slightly on her lap as if playing an invisible keyboard. The gray-haired woman had gone too, leaving Mei Lin alone with her thoughts. When the second half began, Ivan Petrov returned to the stage with a different energy. He seemed more relaxed now, and after playing a particularly difficult Liszt piece, he stood and approached the microphone set up at the edge of the stage. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his accent giving his words a rich texture. "For this next segment, I would like to try something a bit different." The audience stirred with interest. Mei Lin leaned forward slightly. "Music is not just for professionals like myself," Ivan continued, his eyes twinkling. "It belongs to everyone. Sometimes we discover incredible talent in the most unexpected places." He paused dramatically. "Tonight I would like to invite someone from the audience to join me on stage for a special demonstration." Whispers rippled through the crowd. This was unusual. Most classical performances were formal affairs where audience participation was limited to applause at appropriate moments. Some people looked excited, others nervous. "Don't worry," Ivan laughed, sensing the tension. "I won't ask you to play anything difficult. Just a simple tune to show how music connects us all." His eyes scanned the crowd, moving row by row. People shifted in their seats, some looking down to avoid eye contact, others sitting up straighter, hoping to be chosen. Perhaps. Ivan's gaze stopped, and Mei Lin realized with a jolt that he was looking directly at her. "You, the young lady in the blue dress." A spotlight swung around and found her, its bright beam making her blink. Hundreds of faces turned to look at her, and her heart began to pound so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Me?" she whispered, though of course he couldn't hear her from the stage. Ivan nodded encouragingly and gestured for her to come forward. "Please join me." Mei Lin's legs felt like jelly as she stood. The gray-haired woman had returned and was now giving her an encouraging smile. "Go on, dear," she whispered. The walk to the stage felt like the longest journey of Mei Lin's life. She was acutely aware of every step, every pair of eyes watching her. Some people were smiling, others whispering behind their hands. She heard someone say, "This should be interesting," followed by a muffled laugh. As she reached the steps to the stage, a stagehand appeared to guide her up. The bright lights were disorienting after sitting in the dimmed auditorium. Up close, Ivan Petrov was even more intimidating, tall and commanding with an air of absolute confidence. "Welcome," he said warmly, extending his hand. His palm was dry and cool against her damp one. "What is your name?" "Mei Lin," she said, her voice barely audible even to herself. Ivan repeated her name into the microphone, and it echoed around the hall. "Mei Lin, thank you for being brave enough to join me. Tell me, do you play the piano?" The question hung in the air. Mei Lin looked out at the sea of faces watching her, then back at Ivan. His expression was friendly but had a hint of something else. Amusement, perhaps. She realized suddenly that this was part of his show. He probably did this in every city, bringing up someone who would stumble through a simple piece, providing entertainment through contrast with his own brilliance. She could lie, say no and be excused, or admit to just knowing the basics and play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star while everyone chuckled politely. But something inside her, perhaps pride, perhaps a lifetime of being underestimated, made her answer honestly. "I play a little," she said softly. Ivan's smile widened. "Wonderful. Then perhaps you would honor us by playing something simple. Do you know For Elise? Most beginners learn this piece." There were a few knowing chuckles from the audience. Ivan gestured to his concert grand piano, a magnificent instrument worth more than Mei Lin would earn in 10 years. She hesitated, looking at the gleaming piano with both longing and fear. "Don't worry," Ivan said, his voice taking on a slightly patronizing tone that the audience couldn't hear. "Just do your best. It's all in good fun." He led her to the piano bench and helped her sit, adjusting the microphone so it would pick up both the piano and any conversation between them. Mei Lin stared at the keys, perfect white and black rectangles stretching before her like a path into another world. The audience waited in silence. She could feel Ivan standing nearby, arms probably crossed, expecting her to plink out a halting version of the famous Beethoven bagatelle. She imagined the smiles, the polite applause that would follow her amateur attempt. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. In her small apartment, with her second-hand keyboard, she played for hours when no one could hear. In the empty hotel room she cleaned, she would sometimes dare to play a few notes on the fancy pianos in the luxury suites when the guests were out. No one had ever heard her play, not really. No one knew how much music lived inside her, how it flowed through her veins and filled her dreams. No one knew how many hours she had spent watching videos of pianists like Ivan Petrov, memorizing their finger positions, their techniques, their interpretations. Mei Lin opened her eyes and placed her fingers on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. The moment of truth had arrived. The concert hall held its collective breath as Mei Lin sat before the magnificent grand piano. Hundreds of eyes watched her, some with amusement, others with pity, yet all of them expecting very little. She could feel Ivan Petrov hovering nearby, his presence both intimidating and challenging. In this moment, she understood clearly what was happening. She was meant to be the punchline to his sophisticated joke, the amateur whose fumbling would highlight his mastery. She thought of her tiny apartment, of the worn keyboard she had found at a garage sale 4 years ago. She remembered the nights spent watching tutorials on her cracked phone screen, the mornings practicing in the darkness before dawn, the blisters that formed and hardened into calluses on her fingertips. No one had ever heard her play, not really. Not the music that lived inside her. Mei-Lin closed her eyes for one final moment, drew a deep breath, and made her decision. Her fingers struck the first notes, not of Für Elise as Ivan had suggested, but of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. The opening G octaves resonated through the hall, gentle yet commanding attention. She felt rather than saw Ivan's posture change beside her, the shift from relaxed amusement to sudden alertness. But she couldn't focus on him now. The music had taken over. Her hands moved across the keyboard with a fluidity that came from countless hours of practice. The piece began simply enough, almost deceptively so, before building into cascading notes that required precise fingerwork and control. Mei-Lin leaned into the music, her body swaying slightly as the melody flowed through her. From his position at the side of the stage, Ivan Petrov's expression transformed from confident smugness to confusion, then to astonishment. He had expected her to play a halting, simplistic version of Beethoven's familiar tune, the musical equivalent of a child's drawing compared to his masterpieces. Instead, she had launched fearlessly into one of the most challenging works in the classical canon, and she was playing it beautifully. In the audience, the gray-haired woman who had sat beside Mei-Lin straightened in her seat, opera glasses raised to her eyes in disbelief. Around her, other audience members exchanged glances of confusion and growing wonder. A few checked their programs as if there might be some explanation there. Perhaps this was all part of the show, a plant in the audience, a staged moment. But the genuine shock on Ivan's face told the truth. This was no act. Mei-Lin had now reached the middle section of the ballad, where the tempo increased and the technical demands grew even more intense. Her fingers flew across the keys with astonishing precision, each note distinct yet flowing seamlessly into the next. The melody sang above the complex harmonies her left hand created, telling a story of both tenderness and power. Ivan took a few steps back, giving her the stage completely. His eyes never left her hands, watching with professional assessment that slowly transformed into genuine admiration. He had played this piece hundreds of times himself, knew every challenge, every potential pitfall. Yet here was this unknown woman in a simple blue dress, navigating the treacherous musical waters with remarkable skill. The concert hall had fallen into absolute silence except for the music. Not a cough, not a whisper, not the rustle of a program disrupted the spell Mei-Lin was casting. Even the usual shuffling of feet had ceased. The entire audience seemed to be holding its breath, witnessing something extraordinary unfold before them. As Mei-Lin approached the final section of the piece, the presto con fuoco, where the tempo becomes even more demanding and the notes tumble like a waterfall, a single bead of sweat rolled down her temple. This was the part that had given her the most trouble during her solitary practice sessions, the section where her modest keyboard at home couldn't quite keep up with the rapid keystrokes required. But the magnificent Steinway beneath her fingers now responded to her lightest touch, enabling her to create exactly the sound she had always heard in her mind, but could never fully produce. The bass notes rumbled like distant thunder while the higher register sang clear as a silver bell. In the front row, an elderly man who had attended classical concerts for more than 60 years found tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. 2 rows behind him, a young boy who had been dragged to the concert by his parents sat transfixed, mouth slightly open, all thoughts of his video games forgotten. And scattered throughout the audience, professional musicians and critics who had come to hear Ivan Petrov play now leaned forward in their seats, witnessing the birth of something remarkable. Ivan himself had moved to where he could see Mei-Lin's face. What he saw there moved him deeply. She was transformed, the nervousness gone, replaced by complete immersion in the music. Her expression shifted with the changing moods of the piece, from serene to intense to triumphant. This was no mere technical accomplishment. This was artistry of the highest order. As Mei-Lin reached the thunderous coda, her hands leapt across octaves with fearless precision. The final passages, among the most difficult in piano literature, poured from her fingers as naturally as water flowing downhill. The last chords resonated through the hall, powerful, defiant, and utterly perfect. Then silence. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. Maylin's hands remained suspended above the keys, her head bowed slightly, the final notes still hanging in the air around her. The moment was so fragile, so magical, that it seemed the slightest movement might shatter it. Then someone in the back of the hall stood up. Then another. And another. Suddenly, the entire audience was on its feet and the silence exploded into thunderous applause. Maylin looked up, startled as if awakening from a dream. The sound washed over her like a wave, almost physical in its intensity. She turned to see Ivan Petrov staring at her, his hands clapping slowly, deliberately, his eyes wide with what could only be described as wonder. "Who are you?" he mouthed, though she couldn't hear him over the roar of the audience. The applause continued, showing no signs of diminishing. People were shouting, "Bravo!" and "Encore." A woman in the front row was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. A man was pounding his hands together so hard that his face had turned red with the effort. Maylin stood uncertainly, unsure of what to do. She had never received applause before, had never performed before an audience at all. She made a small, awkward bow, which only intensified the audience's response. Ivan stepped forward then, taking her hand and raising it high, a gesture universally recognized in the world of performance. The audience roared its approval. With his other hand, he gestured toward her, then stepped back, giving her the spotlight completely. "Take a bow," he said, loud enough for her to hear this time. "You've earned it." Maylin bowed again, deeper this time, the way she had seen professionals do in videos. The applause impossibly grew even louder. When she straightened, Ivan was beside her again. He leaned close to speak into her ear. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Where did you study?" Maylin shook her head. "I never studied. I taught myself." Ivan's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Self-taught? That's impossible." "I watch videos online," she said simply, "and I practice whenever I can." Before Ivan could respond, the orchestra conductor had joined them on stage, his face alight with excitement. He took Maylin's hand and shook it vigorously. "Magnificent, my dear. Simply magnificent," he exclaimed. "I've never heard an amateur play with such feeling, such technical precision." "Thank you," Maylin said softly, still overwhelmed by the continuing applause. The conductor turned to Ivan. "Did you plan this? Is she your student?" Ivan shook his head, still looking slightly dazed. "No, this was unexpected. I've never met her before tonight." The conductor looked back at Maylin with increased interest. "Then this is even more remarkable. My dear, you have an extraordinary gift." The applause was finally beginning to diminish, though many in the audience remained standing. Ivan stepped forward to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "I believe we have all just witnessed something truly special. I must confess, when I invited this young lady to play, I had no idea what we were about to experience." He turned to Maylin with a smile that held genuine warmth and respect. "I think it's safe to say that the joke was on me." This brought a wave of appreciative laughter from the audience. "Would you please tell everyone your name?" Ivan asked, holding the microphone toward her. "Maylin," she said softly, her voice amplified through the hall. "Maylin," Ivan repeated, turning back to the audience. "Remember that name, ladies and gentlemen. I suspect we'll all be hearing it again." More applause followed this pronouncement. Maylin stood there feeling as if she were floating, as if the ground beneath her feet had vanished and she was suspended in some dream from which she must eventually awaken. But the thunderous applause, Ivan's respectful gaze, and the conductor's enthusiastic handshake were all very real. Something had changed in her life, irrevocably and profoundly. In the space of a single piece of music, as the applause finally began to fade, Ivan leaned close to her again. "We have much to discuss," he said quietly. "But first, I believe they want an encore." Maylin stood frozen, Ivan's words about an encore ringing in her ears. "Play again?" Her heart was already racing from the first performance, her hands trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and disbelief at what had just happened. The audience continued their enthusiastic applause, their expectations hanging in the air like an unspoken question. "I don't know if I can," she whispered to Ivan, suddenly feeling very small again under the bright stage lights. Ivan looked at her with newfound respect. "What else can you play?" he asked gently. Mei-Lin thought for a moment. There was another piece she had practiced countless times, one that spoke to her soul even more deeply than the Chopin ballad. "Debussy," she said softly. "Clair de Lune." Ivan's eyebrows rose slightly and a small smile touched his lips. "Perfect," he said, and stepped back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "Mei-Lin has agreed to play once more for us tonight. Please welcome her again as she performs Debussy's Clair de Lune." A fresh wave of applause washed over the hall as Mei-Lin returned to the piano bench. This time she sat with slightly more confidence, adjusting the bench position with care. The audience settled into an expectant hush. Mei-Lin placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment. Unlike the technical fireworks of the Chopin piece, Clair de Lune was all about touch, about creating a dreamlike atmosphere, about making the piano sing with an almost otherworldly beauty. It required a different kind of virtuosity, not flash and speed but control and sensitivity. The opening notes floated into the concert hall like moonlight spilling through a window. Soft, delicate, yet clear as crystal, Mei-Lin's fingers caressed rather than struck the keys, coaxing from them a sound so pure it seemed to bypass the ears and go straight to the heart. From his position at the side of the stage, Ivan watched with growing wonder. Her technique was remarkable, yes, especially for someone who claimed to be self-taught, but it was her musicality that truly astonished him. She played as if she understood the very soul of the music, as if she and Debussy shared some secret language that transcended time and space. In the third row, the gray-haired woman who had sat beside Mei-Lin earlier dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Next to her, a young man who had been scrolling through his phone before the concert now sat transfixed, his device forgotten in his lap. Throughout the hall, people leaned forward in their seats, as if drawn physically toward the source of such beauty. As the piece progressed, Mei-Lin felt herself becoming one with the music in a way that had never happened during her solitary practice sessions. The magnificent piano responded to her touch like a living thing, allowing her to shape phrases with a subtlety she had only dreamed of before. The acoustics of the hall carried every nuance to the farthest corners, wrapping the audience in a shared experience of wonder. Time seemed to slow, to stretch, to lose all meaning. There was only this moment, these notes, this communion between performer and listeners united by something that transcended words. When the final chords faded into silence, the spell remained unbroken for several heartbeats. Then once again the audience rose to their feet. This time the applause was different, not the explosive shock of their first reaction, but something deeper, more reverent, as if acknowledging they had been witnesses to something sacred. Many were openly weeping. Others stood with expressions of stunned appreciation. A famous music critic in the fifth row had abandoned any pretense of professional detachment and was applauding with unrestrained enthusiasm, calling "Brava! Brava!" Mei-Lin rose and bowed again, still awkward but with growing poise. Ivan approached and once more raised her hand in triumph. The audience showed no signs of tiring in their appreciation. "I think," Ivan said into the microphone when the applause finally began to subside, "that we have all been privileged to witness the emergence of a remarkable talent tonight." He turned to Mei-Lin. "Would you share with us a little about yourself? Where did you learn to play with such artistry?" Mei-Lin stepped hesitantly to the microphone. The sea of faces before her was intimidating, but the warmth in their expressions gave her courage. "I clean rooms at the Grand Palace Hotel," she said simply. The hall grew even quieter, people straining to hear her soft voice. "I never had money for lessons or a real piano. I taught myself by watching videos online and practicing on a small keyboard I bought secondhand." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the crowd. "Sometimes," she continued, "gaining confidence. When the guests are out, I play on the pianos in the luxury suites." She paused, adding with a small smile, very quietly. This brought a wave of appreciative laughter from the audience. "And you've never had formal training?" Ivan asked, still looking slightly incredulous. Mei-Lin shook her head. "No, music just makes sense to me. I hear something once and I can usually play it." I've watched your concerts online many times, she added, glancing at Ivan with shy admiration. You were my teacher in a way, though you didn't know it. Ivan seemed momentarily at a loss for words, touched by this unexpected revelation. The conductor, who had been watching from the wings, stepped forward. Remarkable, he said, speaking both to Mei Lin and to the audience. In my 40 years conducting orchestras around the world, I have rarely encountered such natural talent. He turned to Mei Lin. My dear, such a gift should be nurtured. Would you be interested in studying formally? Mei Lin's eyes widened. I could never afford— There are scholarships, the conductor interrupted gently. For exceptional talents like yours, doors can open. A distinguished-looking woman in the front row stood up. I'm the Dean of the National Conservatory of Music, she called out. We would be honored to offer you a full scholarship, starting immediately. Gasps and excited murmurs spread through the audience. Mei Lin felt the room spinning slightly around her. Just hours ago, she had been an anonymous hotel cleaner, saving every spare dollar to buy concert tickets. Now she stood on stage with a world-famous pianist and was being offered a scholarship to one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say yes, Ivan said quietly beside her, smiling. Before Mei Lin could respond, there was a commotion at the back of the hall. A young man was making his way down the aisle holding a phone. He approached the stage and spoke urgently to the concert manager, who then whispered something to the conductor. The conductor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He turned to Mei Lin with an amazed expression. It seems someone in the audience recorded your performance on their phone and posted it online. It's already going viral. He checked his own phone. Over 20,000 views in just the last 15 minutes. Ivan laughed, shaking his head in wonder. Welcome to the digital age, he said. Mei Lin, I believe your life is about to change very dramatically. As if to confirm his words, a reporter from the local arts section of the newspaper had appeared at the edge of the stage, notebook in hand. Behind her, a photographer was snapping pictures. More phones were raised throughout the audience, capturing the historic moment. Mei Lin felt overwhelmed, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't even name. Joy, fear, disbelief, hope. They swirled within her like leaves caught in a whirlwind. She glanced at Ivan, seeking some anchor in this storm of sudden change. It's a lot to take in, he said kindly, recognizing her overwhelmed expression. But talent like yours doesn't come along every day. The world needs to hear you play. But I'm just— Mei Lin gestured helplessly at herself, at her simple blue dress, at all that she was and had been until this moment. You're a pianist, Ivan said firmly. Everything else is just details. The concert manager approached with a clipboard. We've already had calls from 3 radio stations and a morning television show, she said breathlessly. They all want interviews. And the record company that handles Maestro Petrov's recordings is asking if you have representation. Mei Lin looked blankly at the woman. Representation? An agent, Ivan explained. Someone to handle the business side of a musical career. He paused, studying her. This is happening very fast. Perhaps you'd like some time to think. Mei Lin nodded gratefully. The conductor stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that this has been an extraordinary evening. Let's allow Ms. Mei Lin some space to absorb what has happened. He turned to her. My office will contact you tomorrow about the scholarship details, if that's acceptable. Yes, Mei Lin managed. Thank you. As the conductor made some closing remarks to the audience, Ivan guided Mei Lin gently toward the wings of the stage. Away from the bright lights, she took a deep, shaky breath. Are you all right? Ivan asked. I don't know, she answered honestly. This morning I woke up as a hotel maid. Tonight She trailed off, unable to find the words for what she had become. Discovered, Ivan supplied. But the talent was always there, waiting. He hesitated, then added, I owe you an apology. I invited you on stage expecting— Well, not what happened. I underestimated you based on appearances. Mei Lin smiled slightly. Most people do. Not anymore, Ivan said. After tonight, the world will know your name. The next morning, Mei Lin woke in her tiny apartment to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. She had never received so many notifications before. Rubbing sleep from her eyes, she picked up the device and nearly dropped it in shock. Thousands of messages, comments, and friend requests flooded her social media accounts, which until yesterday had barely seen any activity. The video of her performance had been viewed over 2 million times overnight. Mei Lin sat on the edge of her bed, trying to process what was happening. Her small room looked exactly the same. The worn carpet, the faded curtains, the second-hand keyboard balanced on a wobbly desk. But the world outside had changed completely. Her phone rang. It was her supervisor from the hotel. "Mei Lin, is it really you in that video? Playing piano at the concert hall last night?" "Yes," she said quietly, still not quite believing it herself. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" Her supervisor exclaimed, "Everyone at the hotel is talking about it. The manager wants to see you." "I'm supposed to work the morning shift today," Mei Lin said, her practical side still focused on her responsibilities. "Never mind that," her supervisor said. "The manager says to come to his office when you arrive. And there are reporters in the lobby asking about you." After a quick breakfast and careful consideration of her limited wardrobe, Mei Lin chose her nicest outfit, a simple blue skirt and white blouse she usually saved for special occasions. She caught the bus to the Grand Palace Hotel, just as she did every morning, but today felt surreal. As soon as she walked through the staff entrance, people stopped what they were doing to look at her. Kitchen staff, bellhops, and fellow housekeepers all turned to stare. Some smiled and gave thumbs-up signs. Others whispered behind their hands. A young dishwasher actually asked for her autograph. "The pianist lady,"
he explained excitedly.
"My mother cried when she watched your video. She made me watch it 3 times. Mei Lin signed her name with trembling fingers, feeling like she was in some strange dream. The hotel manager was waiting in his office with the director of guest services. Both stood when she entered. "Mei Lin," the manager said warmly, pulling out a chair for her, something he had never done before. "Please sit down. We've just been watching your performance online. Absolutely extraordinary." "Thank you," she said, perching nervously on the edge of the seat. "We had no idea we had such talent working here," the director of guest services added. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Mei Lin shrugged slightly. "No one asked," she said simply. "And I needed the job." The manager cleared his throat. "About that, we understand you've been offered a scholarship to the National Conservatory?" She nodded. "The dean spoke to me last night. She's sending details today." "Wonderful," the manager exclaimed. "Of course, we'll be sorry to lose you as an employee, but we're thinking of a different arrangement." He leaned forward. "How would you feel about becoming our resident pianist?" Mei Lin blinked in surprise. "Resident pianist? Yes. We have that beautiful grand piano in the main lobby that's hardly used. We usually hire musicians for special events, but having you play regularly would be a tremendous draw for guests. We're prepared to offer a very generous salary, much more than your current position." Before Mei Lin could respond, the director chimed in. "We're already getting calls from guests who saw the video and want to know if you're really our housekeeper. The marketing potential is enormous." Mei Lin felt a flicker of discomfort at this last comment. Was she just a novelty to them? The cleaning woman who could play piano? "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully, "but I think I need to focus on my studies if I accept the scholarship." The manager nodded quickly. Of course. Perhaps a part-time arrangement? Weekends only?" "We're flexible." "I'll think about it," Mei Lin promised, though in her heart, she was already closing the door on this chapter of her life. After leaving the manager's office, Mei Lin was surprised to find Ivan Petrov waiting for her in the staff lounge. He rose when she entered, looking somewhat out of place in his expensive clothes amid the humble surroundings. "Ivan, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on you," he said with genuine concern. "Last night was overwhelming. I thought you might need a friendly face today." His thoughtfulness touched her. "Thank you. It is a bit much to take in. I brought something for you," Ivan said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small business card. "This is my agent's contact information. He's expecting your call. He's the best in the business, honest, which is rare, and he's agreed to represent you if you wish." Mei Lin took the card, staring at the embossed lettering. "I don't know anything about agents or contracts." "That's why you need one," Ivan said gently. "Trust me, things are going to happen very quickly now. You'll need someone to guide you." As if on cue, Mei Lin's phone rang. It was the dean of the conservatory, confirming her scholarship offer and inviting her to tour the campus that afternoon. "See what I mean?" Ivan said when she ended the call. "And this is just the beginning." They found a quiet corner of the hotel's garden to talk. Ivan ordered coffee for them both. and Mei Lin noticed how the staff now looked at her differently, with curiosity and respect rather than indifference. "I'm afraid," she admitted to Ivan as they sat surrounded by flowering plants. "Everything is changing so fast. What scares you most?" he asked. Mei Lin thought for a moment. "Failing," she finally said. "What if I can't live up to everyone's expectations? What if last night was just luck?" Ivan shook his head firmly. "What you did last night wasn't luck. It was the result of years of dedicated practice and extraordinary natural talent. But," he added, seeing her uncertain expression, "your concerns are normal. Every artist has these fears, even you?" she asked skeptically. "Especially me," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Why do you think I work so hard? Practice 8 hours a day even now? The better you get, the higher the expectations." Mei Lin sipped her coffee, considering his words. "There's something else," she said hesitantly. "I'm not sure I want to be famous." Ivan nodded thoughtfully. "Fame is merely a side effect, not the purpose. The purpose is the music." He paused. "Tell me something. When you played last night, how did it feel?" Mei Lin's eyes lit up at the memory. "Like flying," she said without hesitation. "Like everything else disappeared and there was only the music. I felt whole." "That's why you play," Ivan said quietly. "Not for applause or fame or money, but for that feeling. Hold on to that and the rest is just noise." They were interrupted by the arrival of a hotel security officer. "Ms. Lin, there are television crews at the main entrance asking for you. The manager wants to know if you'll speak to them." Mei Lin looked at Ivan in panic. "You don't have to," he assured her. "You can leave through the service entrance. Or," he added, studying her face, "you can take a first step into your new life." Mei Lin took a deep breath. "What would you do?" "It doesn't matter what I would do," Ivan replied. "This is your journey. But remember, they don't own your story just because they want to hear it. Share only what you choose to share." His words gave her courage. Mei Lin stood, smoothed her simple skirt, and nodded to the security officer. "I'll speak with them briefly." The hotel lobby had been transformed into an impromptu press area. 3 television cameras and at least a dozen reporters waited, along with curious hotel guests snapping photos. Mei Lin felt Ivan's reassuring presence behind her as she approached. The questions came rapidly. "Did you really teach yourself to play? How does it feel to become famous overnight? Will you quit your job as a maid? Are you planning to record an album?" Mei Lin answered as honestly as she could, her voice growing stronger with each response. She spoke of her love for music, of listening to classical pieces through her cheap earbuds while cleaning hotel rooms, of practicing in the early morning hours before work. She mentioned nothing of her childhood or personal life, instinctively drawing boundaries around the parts of herself she wished to keep private. One reporter asked, "Do you feel angry that your talent went unrecognized for so long while you worked as a cleaner?" The question hung in the air. Behind her, Mei Lin sensed Ivan tensing, ready to intervene. But she didn't need rescue. "No," she said clearly. "Every job has dignity. Cleaning hotel rooms taught me attention to detail and persistence, qualities that also help with playing piano. I'm grateful for the path that brought me here." Her answer silenced the room momentarily, even the cynical reporters impressed by her grace. As the impromptu press conference concluded, Mei Lin felt a new sense of confidence. This whirlwind wasn't something happening to her. It was something she was choosing to participate in on her own terms. Later that afternoon, as she toured the conservatory's magnificent facilities with its grand practice rooms and concert hall, Mei Lin felt the full weight of the opportunity before her. The dean introduced her to professors who had trained some of the world's finest pianists. They treated her with respect, having watched her performances online. "Your technique is remarkable for someone without formal training," one professor commented, "but there's still much to learn." "I'm ready," Mei Lin said, and she meant it. That evening, as she returned to her small apartment for what she knew would be one of her final nights there before moving into the conservatory's residence halls, Mei Lin sat at her humble keyboard. The plastic keys felt different now, after experiencing the magnificent Steinway on the concert stage. Yet this small instrument had been her faithful companion for years. She played a simple melody, one of the first pieces she had taught herself. The sound was tinny compared to a real piano, but the music was still there. Her phone began to ring again. More reporters, more opportunities, more people wanting a piece of the overnight sensation. Mei Lin let it ring and continued playing. Ivan was right. The fame, the attention, the opportunities, these were all just noise. The music was what mattered, and tomorrow would bring a whole new movement in the surprising symphony her life had become. 1 year later, Maylene stood in the wings of the same concert hall where her life had changed so dramatically. The familiar nervous flutter filled her stomach, but it was different now. A comfortable tension like an old friend. Through the curtain, she could hear the buzz of the packed audience. Every seat was filled for tonight's special performance. "Nervous?" asked a familiar voice behind her. Maylin turned to see Ivan, elegant as always in his concert attire. They had become close friends over the past year, mentor and student, colleagues, and now, for the first time, they would perform together as equals. "A little," she admitted, "but the good kind of nervous. That never goes away," Ivan said with a smile. "The day it does is the day you should stop performing." So much had happened in 12 months. Maylin had thrown herself into her studies at the conservatory with the same determination that had driven her self-teaching. Her professors were astonished by her progress. What might have taken another student years to master, she absorbed in months. Her natural talent, combined with her incredible work ethic, had accelerated her development beyond anyone's expectations. There had been challenges, of course. The transition from anonymous hotel worker to celebrated pianist hadn't been entirely smooth. Some critics had dismissed her as a novelty, a flash-in-the-pan sensation whose fame would quickly fade. Others questioned whether someone without traditional training could ever truly master the classical repertoire. Maylin had answered them all not with words, but with music. Her first formal recital 3 months into her studies had silenced many doubters. By 6 months she had performed with the City Symphony, and now, a year later, she was about to share the stage with Ivan Petrov himself in a special benefit concert that had sold out within hours of being announced. 5 minutes, called the stage manager. Ivan squeezed her shoulder supportively. "Remember what we practiced. Just like in rehearsal. The audience disappears once you start playing." Maylin nodded, taking deep breaths to calm herself. She wore a simple but elegant black dress, a far cry from the faded blue outfit she had worn that fateful night. The shy hotel maid was gone, replaced by a confident young artist. Yet inside, she was still the same person who had found escape and expression through music played on a second-hand keyboard in a tiny apartment. The stage manager gave the final signal. Ivan stepped out first to enthusiastic applause. He had become not just Maylene's mentor, but her champion, using his considerable influence in the music world to open doors that might otherwise have remained closed to someone with her unconventional background. Then the announcer's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Maylene." She stepped into the spotlight, the applause washing over her like a wave. Many in the audience had been present for her debut a year ago. Some held phones, ready to capture another potential viral moment. Though the conservatory had instituted a strict recording policy for official performances, Maylin took her place at one of the 2 grand pianos positioned center stage. Ivan sat at the other. They would perform Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2 for 2 pianos, a challenging piece that showcased both technical skill and artistic interpretation. They exchanged a glance, a slight nod, and began. The music flowed between them, a conversation of notes and emotions. They breathed together, their timing impeccable, each anticipating the other's subtle shifts in tempo and dynamics. When Ivan took the lead, Maylin supported him with delicate accompaniment. When it was her turn to carry the melody, he created the perfect foundation for her expression. From her seat in the 3rd row, the exact spot where Maylin had sat a year ago, the gray-haired woman who had been Maylin's seatmate that night watched with tears in her eyes. She had followed the young pianist's journey through news articles and social media, proud as though watching a granddaughter succeed. Around her, the audience sat transfixed, witnessing not just technical mastery but genuine artistic connection. As they reached the final movement, Maylin felt that familiar sensation of flying, of becoming one with the music. Her fingers moved across the keys with both precision and freedom. All the hours of practice, all the struggles and triumphs of the past year, dissolved into this perfect moment of creation. The final notes hung in the air like stars, and then faded into a silence so complete you could hear the soft hum of the stage lights. Then came the explosion, applause, cheers, people rising to their feet in a wave that swept from the front row to the back of the hall. Ivan stood and extended his hand to Mei Lin. They bowed together, partners and equals. The standing ovation continued for nearly 5 minutes, the audience unwilling to let the magic of the moment end. As they finally left the stage, Ivan turned to Mei Lin with pride shining in his eyes. "That," he said emphatically, "was not luck. That was artistry of the highest order." In the green room, a small reception had been arranged. The dean of the conservatory raised a glass. "To our brightest star," she said, smiling at Mei Lin, "and to the remarkable journey that brought her to us." Mei Lin felt her cheeks warm at the praise. Despite a year in the spotlight, she still found such moments slightly uncomfortable. She preferred to let her music speak for her. Among the well-wishers was a surprise guest, her former hotel manager. "I came to congratulate you," he said, seeming somewhat awkward in this rarefied setting. "Everyone at the hotel is so proud. We framed an article about you in the lobby, right next to the piano you never got to play for us." Mei Lin smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you for coming, and for understanding when I had to leave so suddenly. Best housekeeper we ever lost," he joked, then added more seriously, "but the world gained something much more valuable." As the reception continued around her, Mei Lin found a quiet moment to step away. She slipped back onto the now empty stage, looking out at the vacant seats where hundreds had sat enraptured just moments before. A year ago, she had stood in the same spot, terrified and exhilarated, playing her heart out for strangers who expected nothing from her. Now those strangers were fans who came with expectations, who knew her name, who followed her musical journey with interest. It was both a burden and a gift. "There you are," Ivan said, finding her alone on the stage. "Everyone's looking for you. The critics want interviews, and there's talk of a European tour next season." Mei Lin nodded, taking it all in. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had chosen someone else that night. If I had stayed in my seat instead of walking onto this stage." Ivan considered this. "I believe true talent always finds its way eventually. But perhaps it would have taken longer. Perhaps in a different way." He paused. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Mei Lin thought about the hotel, the endless rooms to clean, the invisibility she had both resented and found comfort in. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity," she admitted, "but not the music I couldn't make, the beautiful pianos I couldn't play, not the silence." A comfortable quiet fell between them, mentor and protege, now friends and collaborators. "I received an interesting proposal today," Ivan said finally. "The Children's Music Foundation wants to create a scholarship program for underprivileged students with musical talent, but no access to training. They've asked if you would be the face of the program, to share your story and help identify promising students who, like you, might otherwise go undiscovered." Mei Lin's eyes widened. "Children like I was?" Ivan nodded. "Your story has resonated with so many people precisely because it reminds us that extraordinary talent exists everywhere, not just in privileged homes or fancy music schools. This program would provide instruments, lessons, mentorship, all the things you never had." For the first time that evening, tears filled Mei Lin's eyes. The idea that her journey could open doors for others touched her deeply. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I would be honored." "I thought you might say that," Ivan smiled. "The foundation is planning a special concert to launch the program. They're hoping we might perform together again." "Of course," Mei Lin agreed. Then with a mischievous glint in her eyes, she added, "But this time no bringing unsuspecting audience members on stage as a joke." Ivan laughed heartily. "I've learned my lesson, though I must say, it's the best mistake I ever made." They walked together back toward the green room, where Mei Lin's new life awaited with all its opportunities and challenges. Tomorrow would bring more practice, more learning, more music to master. The path ahead would not always be easy. Fame had its price, and the classical music world its politics and pressures. But tonight, Mei Lin felt at peace with her journey. From the little girl who pressed her ear against practice room doors to hear music she loved, to the hotel maid who played in secret on guests' pianos, to the artist who now captivated audiences worldwide, each version of herself had led to this moment.